Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: lazy coworker left a big mess. Other coworker blamed me, so my department manager and I teamed up to subtly call out the coworker that blamed me. The second story: boss threatened with termination if we chose to not follow these rules that slowed down our work in the end. The third story: new neighbors won't stop playing loud music and waking up my kid. I start playing louder nursery rhymes. The first story is: don't leave your mess for someone else. Oh, okay, but pass the message along. I work in a grocery store with some real power-hungry managers, especially one who we will call Phil. Obviously not his real name. Phil's been in the store for maybe a year now and no one really likes him that much, not even the department managers. He's very dull, monotonous, and strict. To give an idea of how strict, he literally wrote me up once for calling off to go see my doctor after a serious issue arose. In my department, we also have someone we'll call Mandy. Once again, fake name. She lives to complain and complains to live. She's constantly gossiping and/or complaining, even when she doesn't even know the full context. My department's night crew is not the best, especially one guy in particular, who I'm pretty glad is transferring to a different department come next week. This guy we'll call Harold usually likes to stand around and do nothing, and you're usually working around him. Last night, he was assigned to close the half I work in normally and did basically nothing. In essence, he left behind a mess, and this gave Mandy something to complain about. And because she likes to add her own assumptions in, she thought I was the reason. And so she told Phil all about it, putting my name into it. So this morning, Phil pulls me aside to talk to me about it and tells me I should have been thankful to my department manager, who we'll call Laura, said I shouldn't be written up, not to leave a mess for someone else, as I was trying to grab a broom to sweep up spilled blueberries, which was what even brought me into the room we were talking in the first place, and then called me slow at my job since we didn't have any decorated cakes to put out in a certain spot. And please note, decorating cakes wasn't even on my list. I still had to finish everything on my list, and it takes longer when you're helping customers, which is the bulk of my day, since Mandy usually throws them at me. She's even confided in me that she hates assisting customers. He then said I had to have my side checked out by a manager before I could even leave. This detail is only necessary for the end. This statement wasn't too bad. First things first, I zoomed through all my production to finish my list, so I worked hard and fast on my fruit tarts and cupcakes. For breezing through them, they all looked pretty good, as if I took my time on them. I helped customers quickly but effectively as to not skimp out on customer service, and I didn't take any breaks, through a whole 8-hour shift. My dedication to quickly finishing this list even involved me not getting any food or water, and not taking my medication on time. So aside from being hungry and thirsty, I had some fun gut-wrenching pancreatitis-induced pain, on top of adjusting from a flu shot from the previous day. But I powered through. I also avoided engaging in much conversation with Mandy, who was still trying to act like nothing was wrong. By the time I finished my list, Mandy was gone, and I had an hour and a half of a shift left, which meant I had plenty of time to deep clean. Albeit he said it takes overtime to clean, despite there being signs everywhere to not take overtime. So I did take a little anyways, but not from cleaning. I cleaned everything harder than it's ever been cleaned before. The microwave they always dirty up, don't even know how, was spotless. The table near the microwave that always looks like a bomb went off, not even from my own account at all. I rarely utilize it. It became highly organized and clean, and my half looked so clean, it almost looked how it's supposed to before the closers leave. Before I even finished it up, Laura said it looked great, and I made sure to make mention of the frosting tip out in the open, covered in dark purple frosting, and it was one I never even used before, so it was definitely not my mess. We considered this my checkout by a manager. I took a photo of it when I was done, about 15 minutes before the end of my shift. The last 15 minutes, and then a few, maybe about 10, it wasn't enough to be considered being petty, extra were used to help the other side with their tasks. After a final photo to solidify that I left that side clean as a whistle, I clocked out quickly, to avoid Phil's gaze, since I never called for a manager, so he likely didn't know I was already cleared by Laura. Then I quickly removed my work layers, so I walked out of my job in my casual clothing that was under my uniform. I drove home, then went into my camera roll, went into the photo from 15 minutes before the end of my shift, took a screenshot for the timestamp, cropped out the bottom portion with my other photos, and sent them to Laura to show Phil if he has problems, since my next shift isn't until Thursday night. Since I have classes tomorrow, I gave her a time frame of when I'm able to send any additional photos, like the microwave or just before I left. Since I don't use my phone in class but have a solid almost 2-hour gap between two of my classes, I'm hoping Laura will make mention of some of those extra things I cleaned, not for the credit, but for the messes of others I had to clean, most likely Mandy's, and to show it's a mess even when I'm not there. The second story is, company implements new procedure and policies because of one idiot, gets mad when I follow them to a T. I was working as a yard jockey, responsible for switching out loaded semi-trailers for empty ones. We had recently hired a new professional driver. He seemed intelligent enough to do the job, and as always, we give newbies time to adjust. Our 30 doors all have anywhere from 6 inches to a foot of space in between them, and with semi-trailers that's pretty tight, and no room to back straight in. But this guy was pulling trailers out of the door with people on them, an unsecured product. Needless to say, it always ended in a mess. Our supervisor at the time came up with an ingenious idea to turn a 2-minute job into a 10-minute job. You know, for safety. We were already using a Glad hand lock, a plastic piece that prevents drivers from hooking up and pulling the trailer. But as the jockeys, we had a key. We used the same type of lock on all our doors, and only needed one to unlock them all. He decided we needed as many different ones as possible to make her more difficult, and for the cherry on top, all keys would be hung on the inside door. We were supposed to go in to be sure the door was closed, grab the key, go outside, hook up the trailer, unlock the Glad hand, bring the key inside, hang it up, go out and pull the trailer, put an empty one in, and lock it. On the surface, it was a smart idea. Going inside for the key ensures you're pulling the right one and no one's on it. In practice, it sucked. We figured out rather quickly it was only the keys. Most of us would still step inside and make sure the door was closed, all except the cause of the new system. He continued his same issues because he was grabbing the 3 keys he needed at the start of his shift and continuing business as usual. Supervisor gets upset and requires a mandatory training course on how to properly execute this procedure. It was as satirical as it sounds. Afterwards, we were all threatened with termination because of insubordination if we chose to not follow this because, and I quote verbatim, "I'm the boss and I said so." Okay, boss. Cue busy season and holiday inflation. We're busy. We're usually busy enough that using these locks, period, makes a difference in how fast we move. Most of us jockeys would keep the locks off until things calm down at the end of our shifts. Nope, don't want to get fired. Every single time I did what was asked, they would radio me to let me know they needed a new trailer. I would go in and walk to the door they called, grab a key, walk back to the truck, all walking done at a comfortable stride, you know, for safety. Drive the truck at the 5-mile-per-hour speed limit, implemented by said supervisor, and post it all over our lot. Safety first. Hook up, correctly lifting the trailer off the ground and backing under it to lock it. Walk the key back to the door, about 1/4 of a mile, give or take a few yards. Walk back to the truck, pull it and replace it. By the time I was finished with one, I had 2 more to do. Reminiscent of the Hydra Hercules font. Hacking does nothing, you need to burn it to make the point stick. I kept this pace all day. All day. I was going to cave until he called me into his office to discuss my productivity and how lack of it was making it difficult for them to get caught up inside. At this point, I had about 12 doors that still needed to be swapped. I shrugged and told him I didn't want to be fired, so I was following our training. He was understandably frustrated but understood. He told me to do better. Sure thing, boss. When my shift ended, I had a few trailers I didn't get to and had a discussion with the guy relieving me. Explaining my approach and my plan, he went along with it. I relieved him. He still had a few to take care of as well and continued the fight. The new guy was scheduled to relieve me after this shift, so the jig was up one way or another. I pulled out all the stops this time, taking my breaks and shutting off the radio for them, doing all the little things required of me he had implemented at one time or another, checking all of our trailers on the lot, 100 plus or minus depending on the day, sweeping the lot, scanning the trailers into our system so higher-ups know what trailers need repairs, etc. Around lunch, they were swamped inside, orders everywhere, probably 10 loads just sitting on the floor, and they were still producing more. On my way out, he pulls me aside and threatens to write me up for causing such a slowdown. I explained to him that everything I was doing were things he had said needed to be done every day, and told him it was because he had said it and he's the boss. By the end of the day, I had the keys in our truck, doors all taken care of, and floor clean. He was promoted a couple months later, and the guy that caused it was let go not too long after this. The last story is, wake up my baby, prepare to pay the price. This happened in mid-January of last year. My husband and I have a 2-year-old and had been living in an apartment of the sort for a few years before he was born. For a very long time, we had nice neighbors who understood that if they played music or anything of the sort, it would need to be low because the walls were paper thin. Seriously, you could hear footsteps some days, and if you put on the TV, it could be heard on both sides. It was okay though. See, our neighbors lived there for a very long time. We could have conversations through the walls if we wanted, but they were considerate of me and my husband if we were doing our marital duties, which we learned to be quiet about. The point is, they were nice. But then the husband inherited around $300,000, and they bought a house in the suburbs, which left our neighbor's old apartment empty for a while, until these a-holes moved in. I'll call them F1 and F2. F1 and F2 were fresh out of college, and liked to have loud parties that consisted of many loud other Fs. I had a not even 6-month-old child, and he needed to effing sleep, along with my husband who worked 7 to 6 each day at the time. Teacher. My first attempt at asking them to quiet down was not well received, as they called me an old SH and proceeded to turn up the music louder. So, I called the cops. The cops knock on their door and they ask the guys to turn the music off. So, they finally comply. I can tell they're peeved because I keep hearing my name and SH, head, C in the same sentence. So, the issue. The guys know who called the police on them, and so they start terrorizing me during the day, stealing my parking space, playing music loudly through and up to the walls, and having huge parties, ensuring they wake up me, my husband, and my child. I do not like being kept up until 4 o'clock in the morning because my baby's having a fit due to the loud music. I decided to call the landlord, who basically told me that if I had a problem with them, I should handle it myself, since he had better things to do, and they were paying high rent for the apartment. So, that's what I did. I handled it myself. Instead of sleeping like a normal person, I bought some enormous speakers and put them up to the wall. The wall, which you already know, does not keep out any noise. I waited until they either passed out or turned off the music so they could get a little sleep, and when the guests started to leave, and I start playing loud nursery rhymes. My husband and child are having a blast. Child is loving it, as he slept during the day when the two Fs were at work. As for F1 and F2, they ended up getting peeved and telling us that they would call the cops on us if we didn't turn that lame ASH off. So we did what they did. We turned up the volume and waited for the cops to show up. The luck we had was it was the same cop who we first called. He listened to our story, laughed, and then went to F1 and F2 next door, with orders that if they played loud music again, that they would be arrested for disturbing the peace. The Fs still didn't learn their lesson, and the day after, as my husband's going to work, F1 begins arguing with him and punching him a few times. F2 thinks it's hilarious and records the whole thing, spewing insults the entire time. Now, my husband doesn't fight, because if he did, he could get in trouble with his job. So after being assaulted by a man who clearly didn't realize the consequences, the cops were called by me. This resulted in F1 being taken into custody and charged with assault and battery, with F2 being charged with abetting. Here's the juicy part. F2 was on probation for having prohibited substances, and it got him thrown back in jail. As for F1, he got off easy enough, except he was evicted by my landlord. I hope you guys love these stories. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to know when the new video comes out.